We've already talked about what these apocryphal books are, that some of them are accepted by some churches, some are not. I shared with you, Martin Luther said they're good to study but not doctrinally. I don't know of any church that uses any. Okay, so, but now we're going to look at one of the books, because I think it's significant not only for us as Christians, but also historically, and that's the book of the Maccabees. The Maccabean family was actually called the Hasmoneans, and I shared with you last week, and you have in your book, the line of the Hasmoneans, and they both come down, and at the time of Jesus, all of them, the Maccabean family, are related to King Herod and also the high priest of the day. Okay, so they're very significant. And the name Maccabee came about. It's the Jewish word for hammer, and this is kind of their nickname. Okay, but Hasmonean was their real name. And they're going to have a revolt against the Persians and the Greeks. They've kind of come into the Holy Land, and it covers from about 175 years before the time of Christ to 135 BC, that time period. Okay? Yes, Jordan.
Sorry.
That's okay. Are you eating something healthy or unhealthy?
Healthy.
Healthy. My healthy or you're healthy?
You said that you weren't aware of anybody that uses this stuff doctrinally, but don't the Catholics use the Apocrypha to justify purgatory?
Oh.
And praying for the dead.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay. Is that in the book of Maccabees or a different part of the books of the
Let me look that up. Jim is going to send me a note about that,
Okay.
and I'm going to look that up
Okay.
to make sure, because I don't want to speak out of turn. But I think there's other passages that they use also,
Okay.
not just from the Apocrypha. But I'll look it up.
I think there was something in Corinthians they use like here.
Yeah, there's one.
But it's like,
Yeah.
okay, just
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah, I'll look it up and let you know
Okay.
where the doctrine of purgatory and praying to the saints come from. Now, some of it could also be by papal decree.
Okay.
Okay, because certain doctrines are just papally instituted.
Okay.
Okay, so, okay. The book of Maccabees was probably, or maybe, I shouldn't say probably, was maybe written in Hebrew, but we only have it in Greek, from the Greek Septuagint. One of the church fathers, Origen, one of the early Christians who was very influential in the church, Origen said that he saw it in Hebrew, but we have no Hebrew copies today. They were either lost or it didn't and he was mistaken. Okay? It was written before 63 BC because in 63 BC Pompey takes over Jerusalem. And it's not mentioned at all. So it was probably written around 130, right after the time of the Maccabees. Now, we're going to look at First Maccabees, very historically correct from what we can tell, and if it isn't historically correct, it's what the people of the day believed. Okay? I'm not going to look at Second Maccabees. I'll bring in some of it, okay? Because there'll be some times when there'll be Second Maccabees will say something different than what First Maccabees says. But Second Maccabees is more fictionalized. And Third Maccabees is way out. We think that was written even maybe after the time of Christ. Okay? So there's that controversy. Okay? Any questions before we get started? And I printed it out for you because I know a lot of people do not have the Apocrypha in their Bibles. Okay? And even then it's different translations. Question, Jim?
No.
Okay. So if you would turn with me to 1 Maccabees chapter 1, and this is Old NIV. Okay? The reason I say that is because NIV has gone through an updating, and the publishers of NIV said that no one can publish the old NIV. So there's no more publications. If you go out and purchase a new NIV Bible, it's the new translation, not the old. I much prefer the old, okay? And we're allowed to do this. We're allowed to make copies for classroom activities.
Is it still,
Yep.
is it still printed?
It's not, that's what I'm saying.
It's not printed at all.
It's not printed at all. They sent to anyone who was printing NIV, Concordia Augsburg, what's the... Zondervan, any of them, they said, no longer can you print the old NIV, you must print the new NIV. And there are some things that I really disagree when I look at the new NIV. They try to be much more politically correct. And I think it's not, I'm sensitive to that, but sometimes that makes a difference, okay? Especially when you start looking at the Old Testament. The Old Testament was written with God being a male, okay? Because all of the gods around them, all of the foreign nations had female fertility gods. And it was set up to say, no, we're not like these gods, okay? So I think when you start translating some of that stuff, you can lose it. And there's other places that they tried to be politically correct and it just lost the original meaning. I don't know if I can give you any specific examples. I've studied it.
John the Baptist. He shall not drink wine, or he must not drink wine.
Yeah, this, Benita reminded me, there was, when the old NIV said about John the Baptist, he shall not drink wine, and the new NIV says he must not drink wine. And there are some little things there that I think are not translated as well as the old one. Yeah.
What translation did you use in the service today? E something?
ESV?
That ESV, the English Standard Version, is what Pastor Braun prefers. So all the worship service is ESV now. My sermon was all old NIV. Okay?
Does the worship service?
I'm older than he is. I don't change. Just after I kind of put him on the spot this morning, I just want you all to know I still have my job. I asked him that.
That's good. I'm happy.
Yeah, he didn't know I was going to do that to him. Okay, so we're looking at 1 Maccabees chapter 1. Are you with me? Okay, good. After Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came from the land of Kittim, had defeated King Darius of the Persians and the Medes, he succeeded him as king. So we're looking at the process for Alexander the Great down to where we are today, or where the writing comes from today. He had previously become king of Greece. So now he's king of Greece and Persia and the whole area. Okay? So you remember when we talked about Esther in the Old Testament, when we talked about that and the Feast of Purim, okay, that was during the reign before this. Okay? So now we have, so Esther comes in there, and now this new king is in power. Okay, and this is where we're going to eventually have the Feast of Hanukkah. Because when the Maccabean family succeed in conquering and taking back the temple, they will reconsecrate the temple, and the holy oil will last for 8 days. It's a miracle, and then they say, let's have a celebration to remember that. That's right during this time period. So when you're talking with your Jewish neighbors, it's good to know about Maccabees, okay? Many of them do not, even though it's part of the Jewish history, okay? Verse 2, he fought many battles, conquered strongholds, and put to death the kings of the earth. He was a good guy, right? Okay. He advanced the ends of the earth and plundered many nations. Now, what's this advance the ends of the earth? Well, they're talking about the known world. Okay, so he was the superpower, so anything he had under his control was part of the superpower of the day. And he's just expanding it, going into India, all the way down. He takes over Greece, takes over the Holy Land. He doesn't take over Egypt. He doesn't take over Rome. Rome at this point is kind of a non-starter. It's becoming a world power, but not very much. So they're not too worried about the Romans. Okay? When the earth became quiet before him, the wars ended. He was exalted. I think a little better translation to that is he exalted himself. Okay? And his heart was lifted up. Okay? It was self-aggrandizing. He gathered a very strong army and ruled over countries, nations, and princes, and they became tributary to him. So he kind of allowed the countries to do what they wanted to do, as long as they paid their taxes, as long as they did everything he said, they could kind of rule themselves. Right? And that's the way it was in Israel. After this, he fell sick and perceived that he was dying. Now, he died at Babylon in, was it, I think it was in the 300s. So we're not quite to the time period yet. He was only 32, and he ruled only 12 years.
Wow.
But
Did he die because of a wound in battle? Or?
he died.
He died, okay.
I don't, anytime these leaders die, there's always theories, what did he die of?
Poison.
How did he die? Was he poisoned?
Yeah.
Was he, because a lot of the diseases they didn't know, they looked like other things. I happen to know exactly what happened. He got cross with his wife one day.
She hit him with a lawnmower.
Yeah.
Do we put
Yeah.
that in our notes?
No, don't put that in your notes. Don't put that on the tape either. Yeah. This is off the subject. I'm sorry, I can't stay on subject, guys. My wife and I love old movies.
Oh, yeah.
And we've watched some of these old movies, and the other day we were watching one of them. I won't tell you what it is, but I said, you know what? They couldn't make that movie today because it's too sexist. It's
I know which one you're
just
talking
a
about.
lot of them like that,
Do you like westerns? Old westerns?
This was an old western. Yeah. Clint Eastwood.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I was thought you were talking
Yeah.
Another one.
Yeah, there are other ones, so things have changed, let me tell you guys. Okay. So he summoned his most honored officers, who had been brought up with him from youth, and divided his kingdom among them while he was still alive. Now, at the people of the day, that's what they believed. It isn't quite historically correct. He did have people that he wanted to take over, but they really fought it between them. Okay? So there was some battles over this.
Did he not have a family, children?
I don't know that. I don't know that, Bernice. I don't know.
Yeah. Sort of.
And even if he did have family, maybe he didn't want them to take over.
But they said, but in the number 9, they talked about that.
Oh, do they? Okay.
They all put on the crowns after his death.
Oh, and so the descendants. Yeah, so he must have had some descendants. And after Alexander had reigned 12 years, that's what I told you, he died. Then his officers began to rule, each in his own place. They all put on crowns after his death, and so did their descendants after them for many years. No, I'm sorry, Barbara, the descendants they're talking about are the ones who took over.
Right.
Look,
On the
they-
descendants of the other.
of the officers, okay, and so did their descendants after them for many years. And they caused many evils on the earth.
I'm sorry.
From them came forth a sinful root, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of King Antiochus. Antiochus. He had been a hostage in Rome. So early on, his son was taken to Rome, grew up under Roman control, now comes back and takes over, okay? Epiphanies. Anybody know what Epiphanies means?
Revealing.
The God. God.
Small g.
Yeah. Well, he didn't think of it that way. The revelation of God. He began to reign in 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. Now, we're using different calendars, so just, okay. In those days, that equates to 175, where we're going to start the story, okay? So this man who has been captured, brought up in captivity in Rome, wicked, evil, comes back, declares himself the God. Okay? The image of God, Epiphanies. Okay? We're in the season of Epiphany right now. The revelation of God. So, but he is God. Right? In those days, certain renegades came out from Israel and misled many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the Gentiles around us. For since we separated from them, many disasters have come upon us." So what are these Jews saying? They're saying, hey, let's be just like all of our neighbors. Let's not be any different than any of our neighbors. Okay? That wouldn't happen these days, would it? We're seeing the same thing happen in our world today. People are becoming just like the world. This proposal pleased them, and some of the people eagerly went to the king, who authorized to observe the ordinances of the Gentiles. So I'm a Jew who follows all the Gentiles. How does that work out? So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem. Now, what's a gymnasium?
Hot tub.
Yeah.
Sports.
LA Fitness Center.
Well, no. No, it's much more decadent than that.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah.
the one in England.
What?
I said heated waters.
Yeah. Hot tubs, swimming pools.
With a roof.
Yeah, yeah.
Wooden, stone roof.
Yeah, to hold in all the steam and stuff, yeah. But
Oh, this
a gymnasium,
There's something else, I mean, it's common, there's another one in Hot Springs, but there is no what we're talking about.
I don't know.
Well, they might have created their own hot springs. I don't know if there are any in Jerusalem.
Yeah, I don't know if there is in Jerusalem, no. But they wanted to be just like the Greeks. We wanted to just be like those other people. Let's just be like our neighbors. Pull that down. Okay, wait a minute, where, I lost it.
15.
14.
Okay, and remove the marks of circumcision and abandoned the holy covenant. So they said, we're going to be just like the Greeks. Now, you got to remember that the Greeks and the Jews, all during this time, even into the time of Jesus, felt that any change to the body was mutilation. So they absolutely thought circumcision was the worst thing you could do. They would not wear jewelry like the Egyptians would. They wouldn't have no tattoos, nothing like that. Okay? Now, this is going to set up a problem for many, many years into the New Testament, because when Paul starts going to proclaim the word to the Gentiles, guess what you have? You have a congregation, half Jews and half Gentiles. Okay? The Jews called the Greeks, who were uncircumcised, unclean. Okay? And the Greeks called the Jews mutilators of the flesh. Okay? So you got these two competing things here. Now, why is it so significant for the Jewish people to practice circumcision? still practiced today. And I bet you a lot of Jews don't even know why they do it today. It's because it's part of the ritual of doing it. You do it to all the males, okay? It's because if you're not circumcised, you're not part of the family of God. Now, this actually goes back to the Talmud, who the rabbinical teachers say, and I don't want to be gross, but you have to understand how important this is, okay? That when Adam was created, God created Adam without a foreskin. When Adam sinned, his foreskin grew to symbolize that he was cut off from God. So to get back to God, you have to be circumcised. And if you're not circumcised, you're still cut off from God. Okay? That makes sense to you? Yeah, Jordan, you look like...
No, I'm just curious, like, why did they teach that? I mean, where did that, there's no scriptural basis.
There's no scriptural basis, whatever. But remember, the Jews are, it's the scriptures plus the traditions of the elders.
It goes
Okay.
through history. I mean,
It goes through the history, yeah. And I don't even know if they would proclaim that today, but I can show you in the Talmud where it's at.
Okay.
That was the teaching of the day.
I was just kind of curious about verse 15 when it said they removed the marks of circumcision. How, it's like, were they trying to undo?
They were trying to undo the circumcision. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Uh-huh, yeah. But, you know,
The picture in my head is like.
yeah. We want to be like everybody else. We have this gymnasium where the hot tub is clothing optional. Okay? We want to look just like everybody else. All the Greeks who are coming into our area, all the Romans who are coming into our area. So we have to go along to get along. So let's not do this. Okay? I don't know if they were going so far, because I have no historical, that they were trying to reverse the circumcision, or they were just saying, from now on, we're not going to do that to our children.
Okay.
Okay? If you think about it, circumcision throughout history was a mark of the Jewish people. You know, now I do know at this time that the Egyptians are also practicing circumcision. Not on everybody, but they do practice circumcision. Okay? So, and then even in the history for Christians, at some times circumcision was prohibited by the church. Because that was a Jewish thing. Okay? So, you know, I want us to see that this is a big thing throughout history for the people. Sometimes, yeah, although, again, there's debates, you know. We go back and forth on that, you know. Okay. They abandoned the Holy Covenant. They joined with the Gentiles and sold themselves to do evil. What does it mean they sold themselves to do evil?
They went to the dark side.
Yes. So to speak, yes. They went to the dark side, yes. They did whatever they needed to make money. You know, they just did whatever was necessary. When Antiochus saw that his kingdom was established, he determined to become king of the land of Egypt. I don't have enough. I only have most. I want more. In order that he might reign over both kingdoms. So the two world powers at that point were the Persian, Greeks, and the Egyptians. Let's get the Egyptians. Now, I said to you, one of the things that you could kind of keep with you is this, you know, kind of look, you know, kind of hold on to this. As we're going through this, you can see the Seleucid Empire. That's the Greek and Persian, well, that's the Persians. And then you see Galatia, Pontus, Parthia, that's all the Greeks. And then if you look down below, you see Ptolemaic, that's all the Egyptians. So you'll see Ptolemaic Empire is on the top of the African coast, but they also have a couple of other strongholds. And he says, I want all of this. I'm not satisfied. And now that I did that, I lost my place. Okay.
17.
Thank you. So he invaded Egypt with a strong force, with chariots and elephants and cavalry with a large fleet. So the Persians in those days were training elephants to go into war. You were up nice and high, you could throw spears, you were kind of protected, nobody could kind of get to you. I'm gonna give you a little heads up. There's a Maccabean who becomes really very famous in battle by the name of Judas. And Judas dies in a very unusual way. He sees an elephant coming, and he knows the commander is on the elephant. And he knows he has to take down the elephant to get to the commander. So he runs under the elephant and stabs the elephant. And the elephant dies. I'm not going to tell you what happens. You'll have to wait. It's coming up. Okay. He engaged King Ptolemy of Egypt in battle. That's why it's sometimes called the Ptolemy Empire. That's again family, the family name. Okay? Ptolemy turned and fled before him, and many were wounded and fell. They captured the fortified cities in the land of Egypt, and he plundered the land of Egypt. After subduing Egypt, Antiochus returned in the 140th year, 43rd year, that's 169, if you want to put down in our reckoning. Okay, we do know historically, and if you look at that map again, I lost my big map, and I got to find that. I told you up here is Alexandria, and that's where the largest Jewish population at the time of Jesus was, outside of Israel. Okay, what we know historically is he did battle with the king, Ptolemy, and he captured all this area except for Alexandria. Alexandria, Egypt remained. He never captured that. And he left the battle. We don't know why, but we know historically that's what happened.
Was the Jewish population present there at that time, or did they come after?
That's a good question, Jordan. I don't know when they started moving there. I would say there was a good Jewish population even at that point, because when the high priest is attacked here during this time period, he goes down there and sets up an alternate temple down there in Egypt. So I think there was already quite a presence, but I can't be specific about that.
Where was Alexandria? Was it in that?
No, it's up here. Alexandria,
Oh, you
Egypt.
were
This is
pointing
all.
up here, that's what I thought.
No, I'm sorry.
It's in Egypt.
It's in the Ptolemaic Empire. It's up in.
somewhere.
I think it's up in this little mound
Oh,
up
okay.
here,
Okay.
but it's along here, and then over here. Okay, so if this is Alexandria, this area up here is where Joseph settles with his family. I really wanted to, in my sermon today, get into Joseph and his family, because that's a very unique story. Sometimes go back and read that story, because that's a family that is a dysfunctional family that through God are brought together. And these children are coming back together again. And Joseph has really forgiven his brothers. But the brothers haven't quite accepted that forgiveness. Be a great sermon on forgiveness. And the reason I know that is because they settle, and when their father dies, they come to Joseph and says, our father said, don't do any harm to us. and he says, who am I? Am I God? You know, he had already forgiven them because he had the 40 years to work through that. The brothers did not. They had just met up with him again. Okay? And people always find that strange. There's a couple of things in the Old Testament. If you have your reading from today, go back and look at that. A couple of very unusual things. They're talking about weeping. For an Egyptian to weep in public was the most humiliating thing that you can do. And when Joseph first meets his brothers, he goes off in private to cry. And then he dismisses all the Egyptians and he can cry in front of them. And people often say to me, well, why didn't they recognize him? He was 18, it's 40 years later. He's now adapted to the Egyptian ways. He has an Egyptian wife who's his father-in-law is a priest in the Egyptian temple system, okay, a foreign priest. Most likely, he was wearing makeup, had earrings.
Probably had that black stuff on.
He had all of his eyes made up, probably had a ponytail, no beard. These Jews come with a beard. He's speaking fluent Egyptian at this point. After that time period, you could mistake somebody. You know? I have it all the time. I'm out in public and someone will come up to me and say, Pastor Bauer? And I'll go, oh my goodness, who is that? Think. I had it just this week and I said, yeah. And I hesitated and he said, I'm so-and-so. Ah, okay, now I remember you. You know? So, yeah, just time period. You forget. You know? Has anyone ever had that in their life? Yeah.
Was Antiochus,
Take out your wallet.
Antiochus?
was he a Persian king?
Yeah, Persian Greek. The Persians and Greeks are kind of joined together at this
Because
point.
Alexander actually defeated the Persians,
Yes,
so that
right,
got all
yeah.
mixed up over.
Yeah, they're kind of, you know, they're fighting one to the other. So, yeah, Alexander defeats them, and then there's all these kings in between, and finally now they're taking over more and more power. Okay? And they really are the superpower of the day. Okay? To have chariots was a big deal. You know, because you knew how to do iron work. All right? Just an offside note. One of the things that King David, we believe, did was he did military espionage. Because when you look at the history of King David and the Jews, they had no ironworks. They had plows, they had spears, but in order to have them worked on, they had to go over to the Philistines. The Philistines had the technology. And one time, King David has to flee, and he actually lives in a Philistine neighborhood. And I think he steals the technology because as soon as he comes back to Israel, all of a sudden they have the ability to work in iron. So now they can make chariots and spears and shields and all of that. So that's how Israel got it.
What was that point in time you were talking about?
King David.
What point?
Oh, hundreds of years before this.
Before this?
Yeah. But Antiochus has a powerful force. You know. He went up against Israel and came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary meaning temple, okay, and took the golden altar, the lampstand for the light, and all its utensils. You notice the one thing he didn't mention that would have been in the temple?
The Ark?
The Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
It's already lost.
It was already gone.
It's already lost. It's already gone.
So what did they have in the Holy of Holies at that point?
They would have everything that was in the Holy of Holies. Oh, they would just have what do they call it? The seat of
Mercy?
a mercy seat.
Okay, well that's what the Ark was before, right?
Yes.
So, okay.
They had, yeah.
Okay.
But at this point, we don't know what happened to it. There's all sorts of stories, and you could read about that. There's one city that says they have it, that they've kept it in hiding all these years. I think it was lost during a battle and melted down to gold. You know, they got, and that's why Antiochus is taking all these things. There's all this gold. You know, so they're going to take it all and melt it all down. Okay? So, do people today make golden altars?
No.
Yeah, you want to see one? Avenue E in Stafford has a Buddhist temple.
Oh,
And all you have to do is go by, and all the tops and everything is all gold. It's all gold. Their altar area is all gold.
It's really weird. We went there for Thanksgiving to just kind of go inside, and they have these idols, I guess, inside. And
Yes.
every, like, I don't know, 7 times a day or something, they bring the idols out. for
Every
people
4
to-
hours.
Yeah. to pray
Except
to
at
them.
night.
Okay.
Except at night.
Yeah, it's
They
really
bring-
bizarre.
They bring them out, and the first one is they feed them, they wash them, they clothe them, they bring them out. And I said to them, they're idols like we think of, they look like dolls, kind of, some of them. Some of them are gold, some are different, look just like a doll. And I said to them, now, what do you think about those idols? And they said, they're living beings. That the spirit of that person who the idol represents is still dwelling in those idols. Okay? And if you look at it, it's up, yeah, I mean, we don't realize it's still going on today, the things that are seen in the Bible. If you look at it, it's very high, okay? And it looks almost like it's all carved. It's supposed to be a representation of their Garden of Eden, okay? So all of their temples have to be outside. So they don't have a lot of temples because they don't have a lot of places where they can be outside all the time, okay? But it's up high because the monks who serve the gods live downstairs, okay? And did you notice the separation? The men can go up front, but the women cannot.
I don't remember that part.
I thought it was because of Lutheran. Yeah, Lutheran, we got to separate men and women, No, I specifically asked, and the guy told me that's because the monks are all celibate, and they're up front doing the ceremonies, and they don't want the women to influence the monks.
Well, that's interesting because they have some very risque carvings and stuff all over.
Yes, they do. They do.
So, okay.
They do. And all of the idols are people who have lived, who have now ascended up to nirvana. I think they call it nirvana. Yeah. But you can go there, okay? And if you go across the way, in the compound there, they have a store where they sell the food offered to idols. And that was a controversy in the New Testament. Okay? Still going on today. Okay. All right. He arrogantly entered the temple, took all of the gold. Okay. He took also the table for the bread of the presence, the cups for drink offerings, the bowl, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, and the gold decoration on the front of the temple. He stripped it all off. He's going to melt it down. Okay? He took the silver and the gold and the costly vessels. He took also the hidden treasures that he found. Now, according to 2 Maccabees, now again, we don't know if this is all true, it says he took 18,000 talents of gold. And remember that 2 Maccabees is written from a perspective, okay, because the Maccabean family now become the high priest, and usually it follows the family line, okay? So 2 Maccabees kind of puts bad images on the high priest who is in control. And he says, not only did he steal the gold, but the high priest helped him, and that's how they found the hidden treasure. This high priest who then left and started the second one. I think maybe part of that was, hey, we're high priests now. That high priest and his family aren't coming back. And he was a traitor anyway. So I don't know if that is true or not. I think it's very suspicious. But I share it with you. Okay. Taking them all, he went into his own land. He shed much blood and spoke with great arrogance. He called himself Theos Epiphanes, God manifest. That's not, I'm saying that. That's not here in the scriptures. Okay? Historically, this is not in the book of Maccabees, okay? Historically, he called himself Theos, God, Epiphanes, the image of God. Okay, so I'm God's image, I'm God, okay? That's the way he's saying it. His people around him called him Epiphanes.
Was he also a kid
Okay.
like the other kings and stuff?
He was?
Was he also a kid, like 20-year-old?
No, he was older, okay? But they used Epiphanes, God manifest, and made up this nickname, and the nickname Epiphanes meant a madman. So they changed a couple of letters and got madman,
Did
okay?
he offer a pig on the altar?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's in here.
Oh, is it? Okay.
If it's not, it's in 2 Maccabees. Yes, he did offer a pig, and what I remember about it is when they had the gold top, and it was one stone hewn. It was not pieces. The altar. When the Maccabean family come back and get power again, they can't use that altar because it's been defiled with pig's blood. Especially since it doesn't have the topping on it anymore. They don't know what to do with it. They actually take it out, it says, and they take it out in the back, and they're going to wait until the prophet comes to tell them what to do with it. And the prophet comes and cuts the curtain in half. Jesus. Okay? Israel mourned deeply. That's a lament or a dirge. Have you ever seen videos of the people at the Wailing Wall? They stand there and go, that's a dirge or a lament. That's kind of the idea, okay? Great sadness. Rulers and elders groaned, young women and young men became faint. He's using a little liberty here. The beauty of the women faded. He wasn't from Lake Wobegon. The ones who are laughing, I know. There's a comedian, and he talks about Lake Wobegon, where all the women are
Just above average and
no, all the men are just above average, and all the women.
The women are strong, the men are good looking, and the children are all above average.
All bad. Garrison Keillor, yeah. So, he's kind of using a little license here, but he's saying, it just hit everybody really hard. Every bridegroom took up the lament. He's saying there's universal sorrow over this. She who sat in the bridal chamber was mourning. Even the land trembled from its inhabitants, and all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame. House of Jacob is Israel. 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute, tax collector. This is the year 167. And he came to Jerusalem with a large force.
Yeah,
Why?
you better pay up.
Yeah, pay up or...
Whack you up.
Yeah.
Or your hand or whatever.
Deceitfully, he spoke peaceable words to them, and they believed him. But he suddenly fell upon the city, dealt it a severe blow, and destroyed many people of Israel. Hey, let me in, I'm nice and kind. And then he killed them. Verse 31, he plundered the city, burned it with fire, and tore down its houses and its surrounding walls. They weren't willing to pay the tribute. This is what happens. They took captive the women and children and seized the livestock. Then they fortified the city of David with a great strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel. So now he's even conquered the holy city of Jerusalem. Okay? They stationed there a sinful people, men who were renegades. How would we say it today? Despicable characters?
ISIS.
Yeah, ISIS, yeah. Yeah, terrorists, yeah.
Is this the first wall around the...
This was, an additional wall.
This one?
Additional walls they're putting up. Yeah. These strengthened their position. They stored up arms and food, and collecting the spoils of Jerusalem, they stored them there and became a great menace. So they were kind of like terrorists. Their citadel was, Jerusalem. They kicked out the inhabitants. They had all of their evil forces. I'm being a little facetious, but you know, and they kind of had reign of the whole territory, and they were going out and doing these raids and stuff. Okay, an evil adversary of Israel at all times. On every side of the sanctuary, they shed innocent blood. They even defiled the sanctuary. Because of them, the residents of Jerusalem fled. She became a dwelling of strangers. She became strange to her offspring, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary became desolate like a desert. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach, her honor into contempt. So there's everybody's leaving Jerusalem, this holy city. The temple is now under their control. Everything is going haywire. And I think one of the reasons he's sharing all of this with us is because later on, in a few chapters, they're going to take the holy city of Jerusalem back, and everyone said, it'll never happen. And the point is, it couldn't happen without God's help. Okay? And that's where we're going to pick up the story next week. Dun, dun, dun.
Not 40,
40, right?
Yes, that's where I have her.
40.
So are you busy at the ranch this week at all?
Yeah, Jordan?
Quick question, and I know this is probably a bigger topic, but is a lot of this stuff kind of prophesied Daniel a little bit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, very much so. When you go back to Daniel and the dream and the figure, you know, the gold and the silver, and it's all the various kingdoms that are going to come up and kind of take over Israel.
Well, some of it I think gets more specific with the beasts with the horns and
Yes,
representing the
yes,
kings and all that
yes,
stuff. So
Yes,
okay.
very much so. And unbelievably remarkable, you know, because they'll talk about the different ages. It's the silver age and the gold age, and they all fit into that prophecy wonderfully. Yeah. Okay, anything else before we close? Good class, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to close with a word of prayer and then the benediction. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings that you pour out on us. We see how these Maccabean family was not going to give in to the culture, was not going to go the way everybody else wanted them to go. And how often the world wants to destroy your people, your religion. And we even see that today in maybe more subtle ways, but it's still there in our world today. And we thank and praise you that you give us the strength, you give us the ability to not go that way and not follow the ways of the world. So we just ask that you help us and bless us to be the people you want us to be each and every day. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Receive the benediction of the Lord. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.